Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce the last speaker for this term in the Energy and Environment Group. It's Aurélie Bugeau, who's a professor at the University of Bordeaux and has been visiting here for the last few months, I guess, at the DAP department. And she's going to be talking to us about her work on energy consumption for internet services and the specific interest in video on demand. So thank you so much.
Thank you for introduction. So just to say that I didn't do this work alone, and mainly worked with my colleague Gal Genabo, also leader on this topic. So I said just a bit about me. I was going to, so we already discussed that here in the room, but anyway, so originally I'm a researcher in image processing and analysis. And not for environmental application. And I'm turning into that since few years. And in particular, I'm studying now the environmental impacts of ICT, and both also in research and also in teaching. I've created classes on that. And the questions I am asking are, what are the impacts of using digital technologies? How to estimate those impacts? Our narratives on ICT is sustainable. That is the future that is said on ICT. Is it sustainable and possible for everyone? So, and the thing we wish to do with colleagues also is to provide some tools to compare future scenarios on ICT to see their impacts and the sustainability. So why this study? So you, I guess, already know that ICT accounts for 2 to 4% of greenhouse gas emissions. It is almost 10% of electricity consumption in France. I found yesterday 4 to 6% in UK very quickly on the web. I don't know if this figure is correct or not. And ICT also puts a lot of pressure on resources, pollution, ethics, and geopolitics. So this is why. And despite more and more efficient technologies, there is a high growth on all these demands, all these impacts. And so I don't know if you take the latest figure, you have an increase of data transmission energy use of 20 to 60% in 5 years. Same for data centers workloads and everything. So yeah, an increase of almost 15% per year of power of the biggest supercomputers, so despite efficiency. So yeah, want to question, is this sustainable, and for what do we do this growth, what for? So today I'm going to talk about the assessment of impacts of internet usage. So why this topic? Well, first, one thing is that when I've started to study impacts of ICT and doing presentation and lecture, I always got the same questions coming around, and you get them also. I don't know. You probably have heard them before. Which are, how much carbon footprint does 1 hour of streaming produce? What is the carbon footprint of one Google search? How much does deleting emails reduce carbon footprint? So probably heard that with a lot of answers. So you get some answers, typically, those that are here. And those answers are provided as well, they are proportional to the energy intensity of the internet in watt-hour per gigabyte or gram per gigabyte. So this is how you get those numbers. Unfortunately, when you ask those questions, well, you get answers that are more or less true. Well, depends on a lot of things. But they can lead to some problem if they're used to take decisions on or to provide eco gestures like everyone should delete their emails. That's the priority things to do in a company, or things like that. So sometimes lead to a lot of energy by people. A lot of efforts to ask a lot of efforts to people without having really an impact. So I'm going to review now why is asking these questions a problem. So there are 5 points I'm going to go through. You can interrupt me and tell me if you do not agree with those points also what I say. And I will illustrate on video on demand use case why we could study many other use cases. This one video because it's the most important data transmission through network. So it is where you see a lot of impacts when you modify things. So problem with asking the question, what is the impact of 1 hour of streaming? So first thing, problem number 1, you don't see maybe the, put that here, are the hypotheses. Well, when you ask this question, it's absolutely not complete. The answer will depend on the resolution, the device, Wi-Fi or 4G, which country. So giving just the numbers and an average number, it doesn't really help. So I'm sorry, I put things from France because I know a lot of what's happening in France. I don't know really if there are some tools in UK. Didn't take the time to check. So this is a calculator that has been proposed in France to try to see what's the impact of watching streaming. And you can see that there are, you can input some hypothesis to get your number, and which can make the result vary quite a lot, actually. So if you do 4K on a laptop with Wi-Fi in France, you get 88 grams of CO2 equivalent per hour. And if you do SD video on smartphone with 4G, it's 25 grams. So it's really different regarding the hypothesis. And behind that, there are also a lot of other hidden hypotheses beside that, which depend on the VoD infrastructure, well, actually the internet infrastructure. And concerning video, the question is also, where is the video stored? Is it in France, or is it in the US, or where is it coming from? So how much cable does it requires to come to my home to watch the streaming? And what is the path over the internet? Well, you can't do, obviously, a calculator with all those kind of hypotheses to answer a person, but you need to keep in mind that there are a lot of hypotheses behind one number. And so there have been study of this hour of the consumption of watching 1 hour of VoDs. There have quite a lot of study, actually. So they try to provide an energy consumption and show what happens if you watch in France or in Sweden or in Germany or United Kingdom, depending on the emission factor of the country, or if you watch on any type of device. Obviously, if you watch on a smart TV, it consumes more, it emits more than on a smartphone. So this was the first problem, hypothesis. Second problem is maybe one of the most important one, is the proportionality with the physical reality. Meaning that if you start from there and saying, okay, so this means that if you have, I don't know, 50 grams CO2 per hour, you want to extend that to a global amount per person to take then measures to reduce your carbon emission. The question is reducing by 2 the amount of data of a given usage reduces by 2 its impacts. So if instead of watching 2 hours per day, I decide to watch 1 hour per day to, I don't know, be more respectful to the environment, does it really reduces my impacts by 2? The answer is no. It's not dividing by 2. So you can keep watching 2 hours if you are watching 2 hours. I mean, yeah. Why? So a very conceptual diagram of proportionality between your usage, the time you're watching your video, and the power consumption. So ideally, you want to be proportional. Yeah. But in fact, what happens in the physical reality is that you have a static consumption of all equipments and a dynamic one. And the static part for data centers or for the internet is very high. So whether you watch or not your video, anyway, the energy will be used and will be there. And the fact that you're watching a video really accounts for a small part of the consumption. So there is a real important waste of energy from the static part of, the static consumption. In the case of VoD and other internet use, this is because the infrastructure, the cell is permanently switched on. And the volume of data that passes through the equipment, internet mostly, at a given time has very little influence on the power consumption of the equipment. It's not when you go through a router, it's not because data are passing through that the energy increases. So it's a schematic view for that is like computing infrastructure and storage is like a fridge switch on all the time. And internet is like is as if we were having a bus line that would work 24/7 at very high rate, let's say. So in UK, so if you, well, not whatever the country anyway, but if you do twice less VoD, it's not twice less CO2, it's not twice less water. Well, so presenting the numbers like that can lead to wrong conclusions. Yeah, and why do we, well, as I said, these numbers based on computation of the computation of, sorry, to answer the questions, how much emits 1 hour of VoD, you use intensity values, so in terms of watt per gigabyte or gigabyte per hour. So this is true for almost every part. If you take the data centers, it means that you multiply the energy intensity of your data center times the data you're transmitting, so the data load of your video and the length of your video. So this is how it is computed. But to illustrate the point before, home routers, like they are switched on at almost every home, they are switched on all the time. So this 10 watt it's about 10 watts in general, and so they are consuming all the time. So yeah, so proportionality to physical reality is no. Third problem is a paradox with the efficiency paradox of efficiency indicators. So these intensity numbers in watt hour per gigabyte or 2 per gigabytes are in fact efficiency indicators, in the sense that when you increase the usage, the more gigabytes you use, the more decreasing the more you decrease your intensity. So you use more gigabytes, and in the end, it means that you reduce the number of kilowatts hour per gigabyte. So to have a good efficiency, well, let's use more data somehow. But in the end, the absolute impacts increase. So when used as, sometimes it is used as efficiency indicators, and it can be a problem. And in fact, these intensity numbers, they hide the true energy consumption or the absolute impacts of the internet. So the problem is, it's okay to use intensity indicators. Well, we don't have much other way to measure, so it's okay. It depends what you use them for, I think. And I think it's a problem when they are used to quantify the effects of the consequences of some actions. So I don't know how much you know about attributional, ACA, and consequential things. I don't know how much you know about that. So when you can do a posteriori studies and say, okay, let's take the overall consumption of internet, for instance, and split it with all the usage. Say, okay, video takes that much. I mean, internet in a year has used, I don't know, a certain amount of watt-hour. We have had certain amount of data, of gigabyte of data. Let's divide that, and you split as posteriori study. So this is okay to use those indicators for that. But when you use them as consequential, it's misleading. So it's, as I said before, if you use them to say, okay, so now let's see what happens if we say people can, the population cannot watch only 2 hours of VoD per day. That's the limit. So we will see this, using these indicators, we will not end up with the right answer of the gain we could have. So they are often used as a consequential manner, but it's misleading for short and long-term point of view. So it can be a problem when used for policies. And also it can be used to define some eco-gestures or policies that are not always the most impactful. So I don't know about, I talked about those mails before, but I see that a lot in France. I don't know if it's the same here, but a lot of companies are putting a lot of effort to ask the people to do. They do like computer sustainability day, I don't know, whatever. Say, okay, let's try to clean all our data, so erase picture, erase emails and everything. And we are going to gain or avoid that certain number of emission. So let's do that in the company. But in fact, it's not true, because when you look at those numbers about email, they include the transfers to internet, a certain path, at the time you needed to read this email, a lot of things behind. And yeah, so it shouldn't be used that way because it's really misleading. So generally the numbers that is given that will be gained is not the right ones. And a last problem that's important to me is that it leads also to individualization of at the expense of a collective vision of what should be done. Or yeah, they tend to put the responsibility solely on the consumer side. So saying, okay, rewrite the email, don't watch TV, don't watch streaming, don't that, because you have this number per hour, this gigabyte per hour. Thanks. But it's more systemic. The problem is more systemic. When you look at the ICT infrastructure, it's a whole. I mean, it's always switch on. It's huge. It's a lot of cables, a lot of things. And it's used for many things. So you cannot, it's very hard to individualize really the responsibility. So yeah, it's a tricky role for me on individual numbers. It's good to array, to, yeah, raise awareness and to discuss that a bit, to discuss this topic, but we must be careful when it's used too much to yeah, put a lot of pressure, I think, on the individuals. Yeah.
I've heard this argument made many times that consumers are being asked to do things, it's with the corporations who are responsible, and it's shifting responsibility from corporations to consumers, and so it's bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But if the consumers change behavior in a mass scale, corporations are just at the end serving the consumers, right? Yeah,
so that's the tricky thing. I think we need to find a compromise in all these. And my point here will be, okay, what are the real consequences if the consumer changes? I mean, and where should we have the effort on for the consumers and for the company? Because it's not, well, it seems a win-win, but it's not always a win-win for both parts. I don't know if I'm answering your points.
But I think that what I've learned is that consumers are not responsible. It's the fault of corporations who completely bear responsibility in consumers, and it's a marketing tactic by the corporations to make consumers feel responsible and guilty.
Yeah.
And it's actually not the consumer's fault. My daughter says, actually, it's not, it's really the corporation's fault. And my argument is that, if majority of corporate, majority of consumers express a certain preference, corporations want to sell to them.
That's
choice.
That's true, but in case
Corporations to change. If everybody decides to watch 1 hour of video a day, Netflix is going to have to change the way it does it.
Yeah. So the thing is, that's the question. What happens tomorrow if we all decide not to watch Netflix? Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, the consumption will almost not change. So because all the static energy will already be there.
Yeah. But the thing is, the Netflix consumes over 50% of the internet capacity right now and responsible for much of the growth. If Netflix was to disappear tomorrow as a carrier, people wouldn't upgrade the infrastructure years from now, right? And eventually the infrastructure side will shrink. That's
the question. Will it shrink, or will we keep it on in case of for future demand? All the internet infrastructure is scaled already to increase the demand and everything. So
the demand doesn't increase, then those plans have to be scaled back because they cannot recoup their investment in terms of capital expense. The panel manager sees that the demand reached peak. It's not going to keep growing anymore. Look at electricity system. In most countries, the West, the demand is going down.
Yeah.
It's not going up. And I was involved in negotiating with the Canadian energy planning system. They used to have 2.5% growth every year after the Second World War, after about 19, actually about 2000 or so. And after it stopped, it became flat. They said, we're not going to keep investing in transformers and lines and all this other stuff because it's not growth. It's tricky. And so that argument that corporations don't change because, it's not true because they can't make a profit.
I think this argument depends on the balance of how efficient the market. Right? You get a parallel to a renter and a person owning the house.
Yeah.
If the renter does have no control of upgrading more efficient devices, it is their consumption of electricity, and they could change to a cheaper place which has all the more efficient washing machine. But if the market is not flexible enough for that, then it's the responsibility of the renter, not the person who.
I don't want to derail the talk.
No, but yeah, and there is that, and there is also regarding green country, the one that are developing now, how much should they develop, which size should be their infrastructure, knowing, so there is also that behind, I think. So these were the 5 problems. So I'm gonna present something we have started to do, a tool to try to evaluate impacts of VoD without all those problems. It's a bit technical for a moment, but I will try to stick to the main idea. So our objectives were then given a certain usage, so here VoD, and a perimeter. So we studied France because it was easier for us to get the number. Evaluate the impacts of this usage or a variance of this usage on the IT infrastructure. So this is the general idea. And the idea behind is to try to guide policy decisions at least, or to understand what would be the effects of some decisions. So we propose a model that is parametric. So we have parameters that are the hypotheses actually to try to see where. I always take this example of how many hours you viewed in the video, the resolutions. And some levels to see the size of the infrastructures. We want to see we want to compute the minimal internet infrastructure to allow a certain usage of the internet, let's say. So as I said, we only look France for now because it's also more simple than looking the entire world, and because it's also appropriate for possible policies. Let's switch to let's stick to where there could be policies. So I think at the level of a country is more appropriate than global study for now. And our goal is to model the worst case. So we are looking to pick them at the moment where everyone is watching at the same time. Oh, and not everyone, we put numbers, but like, yeah, we try to look at peak demands. And we're only now, for now, we're only looking to electrical consumption, but we want to go further in the future. I'll talk about that later. So use case. So first we define the use case. So I said it's over the top streaming. So it's like Netflix service. So usually the complete infrastructure of this service goes from media devices to movie production. We are not looking at all these parts. We skip the production of the movie. We skip the devices where it's watched for now, and we stick to the storage of the video, where the video is stored. And how it goes through to one home with fiber right now. We are not looking at 4G or internet. This is ongoing work, but I'm not presenting that today. So trying to take a very simple case, you go from your home router to the data center where your video is stored. Well, it seems very simple, but hey, the infrastructure of internet is highly complex, so it's not that simple. So we need to make a lot of hypotheses. So for Netflix, we were based on Netflix for this study and looked where it was to be the more realistic possible. So we say there is a small data center, a CDN, content delivery network in Paris, and one main data center located in US. We ignore the data center consumption in our study because it's shared with many countries and for many use. So we prefer to leave that out. So anyway, internet is very complex. So we had to do what we did is a simplified tree structure representations. There are many works that exist on how to model the internet infrastructures. That's not our main goal here. So we used a simplified tree representation. You can argue that it's not the most realistic one ever, but it was really to have an order of magnitude of the impacts. And even with a simple tree structure, it already gets very complex as soon as you start to model. So yeah, you go from the data centers to cable indexation with undersea cables, fibers, and then to the CDN, and then you split to get to the final home. And everywhere there are some nodes with more equipments. And so our idea was to propose a model that if we change the use here of the subscribers, how to automatically scales the hardware. So how many, I don't know, switches do you need at this point if you watch a 4K video in every home, for instance, or already. So what are the minimal infrastructures? So yeah, there are a number of equipments everywhere, in every street, in everything that we often don't realize they exist, but they are everywhere and sometimes really a mess. So all these have their own consumption and their own, they are scaled, they are somehow scaled, they should be scaled to the demand. So they're growing very fast because there is huge demand and because also there is concurrency between the companies. So anyway, so to scale, we do something very simple. We say, okay, so given that people are watching this type of video at, let's say 20% are watching a video in 4K at that time, what are the number of equipment that are needed? So at least one per node, because you want the thing to transit from here to here. So at least one equipment at each node, and then we scale also that what is and scale it with the demand. So it's a ratio between the peak rate, the number of data the number of gigabytes that are asked by the subscribers, and the capacity of every equipment. More or less, it's a bit more complicated than that, but yeah. And in fact, what happens is that compared to the intensity coefficients that I mentioned before here, if there is an increasing usage, if you ask more gigabyte here, while you increase the number of equipments, and then you increase the consumption. So yeah, the idea is compute how many equipments are needed everywhere in this simplified network, and so what is the consequence in their consumption.
You the geographic location to account.
Yeah.
Because you can, you have the 16 port, 32 port versus having two separate.
That's what's very complicated.
Right.
So why right now, that's why also we say, okay, we're in France, we know that there is a CDN in Paris, which is logical, and then we go the statistics, the length between one CDN and one subscribers, we try to model that a bit, and that's where the statistical models have to enter after, because yeah. So for now, so this is very simplified model for the moment. We are making it more complex, but we don't want to enter in something that we couldn't understand also. We need to find a compromise. So we put some statistical models that say how many users are watching at the same time and where they are located. And well, same for the position of the nodes and everything. So we're putting some statistical computation behind. So that's the general idea. I don't want to go into much detail of all these very technical equations of each equipment, so on. So let me go to the results and discussions after. So what we've done is we have considered a baseline scenario where 2% of subscriptions of ours are watching 10 using internet with 10 megabytes per second, and so the energy for that with our model is 750 gigawatt hour. It's the annual consumption, and then we did several scenarios from HD to ultra HD plus scenario. So these numbers are really realistic with the Netflix data transmission that is needed. And we've considered that 20% of the population at peak demand is watching at the same time a video on video stream. And so what you can observe with those numbers is that the result is not correlated to bit rates, not directly. So even in comparison with the numbers that we would get with intensity number, we really see here that it's not correlated. It's not because you multiply by, I think it's 40 here, the multiplication of bit rate is times 40 between this scenario and this scenario. You don't get 40 more energy consumption. So let's see more detail. The results. So you have we split the different part of the network to analyze our results, and we have the different scenario here in color. And what we observe, in fact, is that what's consumed more, the more clearly far away is the optical network unit. So it's your terminal, your home router at home, which is not surprising because it's plugged 24/7 in each home, and you have many homes. So this is where you have the most number of things. So in fact, it's really the most important parts. So it's not the home router; it's the terminal that exactly. Yeah, it's what we found as an average. Yeah, it's not that much, but yeah, 10 watts something.
So then wouldn't that be going up? So I can't see that. I can't read the top bar.
This is really, this 2.5 watts only. I don't know. Yeah. What's your question?
So your Wi-Fi router at home
We didn't put it here.
Oh, you
We sticked with the optical network unit. Yeah. We did that for now. It was, but if you add the home router in addition, you can't see anything.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So it's really incredible, actually. For the access network, the part of the network that is the closest to your home, we don't see very much, but you have almost the same thing for all the smaller scenario, and it really increases only for the ultra HD, because in fact one of the equipment had to be scaled, but for the other ones, no, it was the dimension of what only one equipment was okay for the other scenarios. So it's when you switch to a very large scenario that you need to add more equipments. So I think it's something that we wanted to see is, yeah, at what point do we need to add more equipments, at what rate? Yeah. And so if we try to go back to this efficiency estimation and to compare with those efficiency estimation that we talked about before. So what we did is, okay, so this is a realistic number, 2 GB per month of data per subscriber for the baseline, and that people are watching in average 3.2 hours of streaming per day. So we divide it. So this gives us a yearly volume per for friends, for our infrastructure. And so we divide this yearly volume, well, the energy by the yearly volume, and this gives us some intensity indicator. But this intensity, and it confirms again that baseline is absolutely not efficient, while Ultra HD is efficient. So, but, well, if you put, I don't know, it speaks by itself, but yeah, clearly it means that these numbers does not reflect the reality of the overall consumptions. So, yeah. One quick other thing we have looked. So there has been some reports. It's called the LOCAT project that was studying a future of streaming and video on demand and so on. And they proposed in one of their future solutions, they propose and say that it's a very good thing that would be to have a home caches device in every home that would store the videos and download them when there are not a big load of energy or everything. So there is this scenario for the future for 2030 to store the content locally, which would avoid asking too much on the internet at work. And well, their conclusions is that with this home caches device, there would be a reduction of about 25% of streaming downloads and a reduction of consumption of the energy intensity indicators. So they were making a lot of computations from these indicators and said, okay, we're gonna putting home caching here houses. It's a very, very good thing. So we tried to model that with our scenario, our model, and we added this scenario, and we absolutely have a conclusion that is completely contradictory with the author of this study. And obviously why also, because this home cache equipment would be on 24/7, and so will consume.
Another 2.5 watts.
Yeah, I think it's 2 watts. Yeah. So if you do not separate things like that and just take an overall number, you end up with wrong conclusion. And this could be a system that maybe is under development, because yes, some studies are misleading, and they're not wrong. All their, I mean, the computations are okay, but just start from a global numbers that do not reflect the reality. So anyway, let me go through the discussions, conclusions, and discussions. So first, our model implies many hypotheses. We can't do much about this because it's very complex topic and everything. But we use an homogeneous tree and technologies, and that does not also reflect the reality. We need to, as you said, really try to add more statistics behind, but without being too complex. For now, it's only fiber, so I really want to study the 4G, 5G infrastructure. We have restricted parameters. We exclude user devices, data centers, content correction, and encoding right now, but they play a huge role also in the electricity consumption of the video on demand. So that's why it's those numbers that I'm presenting before on gigawatt hour. It's not the overall intensity of the video. It's really a small part of it. Yeah. But what we see, and that's, I think this conclusion is not wrong, even if we are making a lot of approximation, is that increasing resolution and quality is expected to have a significant effect on the computing and storage resources, and is expected to have a significant effect on energy consumption, overall energy consumption of some parts of the network. So we saw that intensity indicators can lead to misleading conclusion, and so we propose this consequential analysis of a given usage. And we want to extend it to other use case where we already did video conferencing a bit. We are starting new thing. We are trying to extend that to, maybe I say that later, but to agriculture also, and things like that, to ICT in agriculture. And one point I want to highlight also is that it's very difficult to obtain precise data for all and precise architecture for infrastructure, even from the operators themselves. We're in contact with and friends with the operators. They don't even know how it's made, the structure of internet and what's used where and how much it consumes. No one has the answer to that. So that's very difficult. Anyway, so what the observation of the conclusion is that enabling home routers or ONU to be switched off when not needed would really reduce the energy consumption. So it's interesting to question which usage is present in such equipment to be switched off. Like we develop smart home, or we will develop, helping tools to turn off lights, or I don't know, whatever, smart home. But it means that we cannot switch off those equipments. So good or bad thing, I don't know. But I think when you develop smart home, you need to think that it prevents some routers to be switched off. You must include that in your computations, I think. We do not look at indirect. We can start looking at indirect impacts, but increasing resolution equipment is, increasing resolution and quality is also expected to play a big role in renewal of end user equipment. So this we do not include for now, but we might in the future with this model, saying, okay, if you propose to people the 8K, Ultra HD and whatever thing, or virtual reality everywhere, that means people will change their end user equipment. So we need to include that in the study. And we do, and this would also increase the electricity consumption and manufacturing impacts. Well, this is a simplified vision of the reality. The dimension is not only driven by peak rates. We're only looking at peak usage right now, but there are also economical competition or political strategies that lead to the over-dimensioning. We were discussing that a bit before, but yeah, it's not this dimensioning of internet is not only driven by the usage. It's driven by a lot of other things. So even if we do the study, I don't know if it can change anything. We haven't done carbon footprint computations. We're sticking to energy for now because we need to know emission factors that are country dependent, of course, but also time dependent. So depending on what time people are watching the streaming, well, maybe with streaming we could do, because it's almost at night, so we could take the emission factor at night, but we haven't added that for the moment. And we haven't performed life cycle assessment, at least look at the whole material production end of life and everything. But the good thing is, as we are able to list every equipment and we know the scaling of the equipment, actually, I think we could start including other information, not only the usage. And yes, as I said, our goal is also to do other applications to try to see impacts of ICT, developments of ICT for other domains. And yeah, one thing our PhD that just started on digitalization of agriculture, to understand well what it implies as consumption, and is it resilient? It's resilience. I think I'm done. Yeah.
Okay, any questions?
I have a question. Yeah, so at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned kind of consumer-led initiatives to try to reduce energy, like deleting emails and things like that. But the point you made was that it's probably ineffectual. aside from innovations on the infrastructure, like you said, smart homes, things like that. Do you or from a policy perspective, is there anything from the consumer side that can really be done that has an effect, or from the policy side, do you envision anything?
Well, I think for consumer, I think erasing the data is really something that has an impact, but not very small emails. Yeah, that was a bit my point. Email. I often take emails as an example because it takes a lot of or to me at least takes a lot of time and energy to clean my emails and decide which one I delete or not, and for a consequence that is very small. So that's why I take this one. But if you erase all your video of cats or whatever you have, I think this has an impact clearly. If there is less demand, maybe in the future there will be less development also. So yeah, if there is a decrease of people watching videos, then there might be less offer and less development in the future anyway. So I think the consumer still has this impact, but the major impacts of consumer is to not buy too much equipment and to not renew its equipment all the time anyway. So that's for ICTs, that's the most important part, I think.
The online audience, are there any other questions? Do you have the slide from the kind of what is the our carbon intensity that you translated it to?
This carbon intensity?
Yeah, of grams CO2 per kilo. It is, this is right.
Yeah, this is kilowatts everywhere.
Yeah.
We haven't done
because for example, when I was looking at the streaming thing where you put 80 grams. Which is there's a wider discussion if, for example, for the remote web, which is also streaming, it's just streaming on video directly. At some point, it is like, for example, cars produce the driving more than
100 grams per kilometer.
Yeah, which is per hour, it's 90 kilometers. Yeah, so yeah, there is kind of a comparison that needs to be made.
It's very small compared to cars. That's That's the point.
But it is, yeah, we had to do before, this could get out of control. It keeps scaling up into like higher
Yeah.
dimensions.
Well, the question is also that ICT is central everywhere in our society today. So the question to me is also, where do we want it really? And what can we, can we provide all those services, all Netflix to 8 billion people or not? And if so, that's also the question.
I mean, one comment is that ICT efficiency has gone up a factor of 10 in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So there was this assumption that, the data centers keep growing and they'll be huge, 2010. In fact, the rate of growth of energy is constant, but the productivity has gone up a factor of 10. So the intensity has gone up a factor of, has improved a factor. So I expect a report that was in 2021, which looked at the rate of growth. I gave a talk about this a couple of years ago or so, where we showed that the ICT, I didn't show this paper showed that the ICT impact is actually stayed constant, which is good. Efficiency actually quite dramatically, especially for big data centers.
Yes.
So that's the comment. The question actually, or maybe it's the direction to future work. I think you asked this question of what can consumers do? Can they turn off things? And my own experience has been this. So I have a TV at home that with people, and I also have a smart router or a router at home. And I find that the boot time is actually very fast. If I turn the TV off and turn it on again, it's about 3-4 minutes. And same thing is true for the router. If I turn the router off and on again, takes let's say 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's absolutely no reason why we should have it. The reason why they have it is because they have these hard-coded timeouts, right? They're saying if for 30 seconds you don't hear this, then you can put the next step or whatever it is. There's no reason to look at this iPad over here, holding up iPad, those are online. The iPad, you turn it on, it comes on right away. It takes a second to do it. Why? Because if you wait 4 minutes for this to come up, nobody's buying the iPad. Right? The routers are designed to be having a very large boot of time because it's meant to be on all the time. If you could use our skills to reduce the boot time for a router to go from 4 minutes to 4 minutes.
Exactly.
I think what will happen is people will turn it off and on right away.
That's true.
Turn off lights, which is rude because it comes on right away. If you wait 4 minutes of lights come on, you never turn it off. So this is to me a design parameter where regulation can play roles, policy regulation. You could investigate. Right?
That's a good idea.
You take the ONU, your home router, and you make it instant on, but instead of finding it, it's in 1 second, right? We could that this how much energy is saved if you also have as part of it the on switch. If you turn it on, and you wake up in the morning and you turn it off, you go to bed at 8, 10 hours, so then you fall asleep. Nobody really cares whether they're asleep.
That's depends if you have smart homes with alarms or with things that
Right. Sure.
so that needs it even at night. But I agree with you. That's a problem. We need instantaneous things. We are not.
Man, about 5 watts, 10 watts, etc. All of these things can be turned off, and they don't. You can reduce the boot time.
That's true.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my suggestion, because you could examine the gain from doing that using your approach, and then that might motivate the policy.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's something that I hear quite a lot. Like, I don't want to have to wait in the morning or when I get home to get my emails or whatever I do on internet. So yeah. Yes. Well, that's the indirect impacts that are in the end.
Basically, as the efficiency of resource increases, the demand will increase proportionally, but the overall, I think it was coal originally.
Luckily, we're not going to Netflix for the 24 hours.
But that's
That's really evil. You can't watch more than 5 Netflix streams 24 hours.
But that's something that really also this Jevons paradox is something that we are a group of people in France on that topic that really want to look at, because I think it's an enormous problem actually.
I also have a thought on a lot of these companies are kind of not quite monopolies, but there's not a lot of alternative choices. Like, where would you go to watch green on Netflix? I don't think there is.
Well, you can decide to go outside and not watch Netflix. That's the first one. That's my answer to that question.
It's hard to live in the modern world, but yeah, I feel like these kind of incentives for companies to seem greener, it just encourages greenwashing, and it's hard for consumers to actually research and understand like what they are.
Mm.
Yeah,
But those you need to be rich enough to have the time.
yeah.
That's something the West can do, but.
Yeah, I get what I'm basically trying to say, but I'm not sure it's really within the community, consumers' responsibility or control. Also, what was the other? Oh yeah, I know you talked about the not the device manufacturing and so on,
Mhm.
but talking about regulation, like open software and hardware can reduce a lot of things like electronic waste. Which I don't know what amount that would contribute towards the carbon cost of these things. If you buy a router, keep it for a decade, doesn't cost that much. But every time you sign up for a different internet service provider, they tend to send you a new one.
Yes, which you can also refuse. This is what you can do at consumers, but that's yeah, that's well, manufacture of smartphone manufacturing is more than 80% of your carbon emissions in the lifetime of your smartphone. So manufacturing is really, really important in ICT and has to be included. Yeah, I have many things. If you want to discuss that, I have also many content, many slides, many things. If you're interested, but I'm still here to discuss those parts. If you're interested, yeah.
It is interesting that because you've got this main backbone infrastructure, which is a monopoly, and you have no option of choosing which cable do they use to get it released. But because it's a monopoly, it's comforting that that one is the smallest part of the puzzle, right? So you don't have to be that, because that's the thing that you cannot change. The thing that has to be demanded. Whereas the closer you go towards your own consumption, more control you have.
Yes, true. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks again.
Well,
That brings us to the end of this talk, and but anyway, we will resume in the next step.